extraordinarily good businessman. It was easy for him, I suppose, because he operated on the wrong side of the law, but he knew how to conduct his businesses, how to conduct the unions, how to conduct the trade association in a way in which would guarantee the mob the greatest amount of money.
With big earners such as Avellino under his command, Corallo was proving to be a worthy successor as boss of the Lucchese family. For a while there seemed to be no end to the river of cash. Tony Dux and his associates were already in the sights of the law, however. After the eye-opening testimony of Joseph Valachi, war on the mafia became a top priority for law enforcement. And yet guys at the top like Corallo felt no fear. The authorities were learning that traditional methods of fighting crime had no long-lasting impact on the mob. For decades, gangsters operated with virtual impunity. On a local level, law enforcement was corrupt from top to bottom. At the national level, a limited war was fought by the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, while the FBI, under the rule of J. Edgar Hoover, officially said there was no mob.
For a long time, until he was embarrassed into admitting the existence of organized crime, Mr. Hoover refused to admit even the existence of organized crime.
Various explanations for Hoover's position include persistent rumors of a secret personal life and that the mob threatened to expose his lifestyle. For sure, Hoover was more interested in wars he could win for the benefit of the media. He was preoccupied with high-profile bank robbers and became obsessed with rooting out communists.
The Communist Party of the United States is a fifth column if there ever was one. It is far better organized than were the Nazis in occupied countries prior to their capitulation. They are seeking to weaken America, just as they did in their era of obstruction when they were aligned with the Nazis. Their goal is...
Charging a person with being a member of a mafia family was unheard of because of the difficulty the government would have in trying to prove that. They didn't have the inside witnesses. They didn't have the tape recordings of discussions between members of the mafia who would recite the names of the families or the leadership, who they might be, or the positions held by this guy and that guy. That came later.
Hard jail time was the furthest thing from the minds of the wise guys, but that too was about to change. After years of operating independently, local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies began cooperating. Ronald Goldstock headed the New York State Organized Crime Task Force in the 80s.
For a period of time, law enforcement had been fighting a war of attrition. Individuals were arrested and indicted for specific crimes. They may be put in prison. Generally, they were out after a relatively short period of time.
The FBI found it a frustrating experience.
We would find a witness. We would develop evidence about the crime. We would arrest the extortionists, and we put them in jail. No matter how many we arrested, as we like to say, there was always 100 in line to take their place.
One thing law enforcement knew was that often mob-related murders occurred with no witnesses or with witnesses who were themselves mobsters and not likely to speak to the authorities. When a member of a gang was killed, it usually sent a message to the others to keep quiet.
That all changed with the RICO statute and electronic surveillance in 1968 and 1970, and other methods of dealing with problems of organized crime where you could look at them as groups of individuals committing patterns of criminal activity.
Greg O'Connell and other prosecutors recognized the importance of the RICO statute.
The racketeering statute was a brilliant invention which enabled the government to charge not just a specific isolated offense of larceny or an arson or a payoff or a bribe or a murder in isolation, which is the way the country operated up until that time. What this offense allowed was the prosecution of an actual organization.
You really can't catch the leaders of organized crime on the streets. That's not where they are. Where they are is in social clubs or in restaurants planning the activities that the soldiers and the captains are going to carry out.
We would plant mics in clubs, in bars, in restaurants, in homes, in different rooms. We would bug telephones, all by court order.
One of the things we were looking to do was to use the RICO statute to indict the commission, the heads of the 5 New York crime families. The Organized Crime Task Force had extraordinary information as to the Lucchese family and some evidence as to the heads of 1 or 2 others. The FBI had bugs in on the heads of 3 families at the time. And so if you combine the 2, there was a mountain of evidence that could be used to indict and convict all of the family bosses.
The New York City Police Department and the FBI began working together with a common goal. Rich Sita was a New York detective on mob duty.
At this point, a marriage was made, if you will, between the FBI and the New York City Police Department Organized Crime Investigation Division, where a commitment of detectives were assigned to FBI squads. And those squads were dedicated to investigations, proactive investigations into organized crime families in the New York City area.
I personally don't believe we could have done the job that we did without the help and assistance of the New York City Police Department. They had an ability to do things from their days on the street as cops and their experience that we could not do. We as agents could not do. We complemented each other beautifully, and it couldn't have been a better match. And without them, as I say, we would have never succeeded as well as we did.
One of the most significant achievements of the joint effort was the planting of a bug in a Jaguar belonging to Lucchese capo Sal Avellino. Investigators learned that Tony Ducks routinely rode with Avellino to discuss mafia business.
Why we only got 150 trucks running when we used to have 300 trucks running, Sal?
They got half of that on the other side, Tony. I mean, come on, we're doing the best we can. Busting my chops here.
Yeah, well, this is our bread and butter, you know that. I want to keep it that way. This is the business that brings in most of the money.
They knew the car would be the key to their investigation. But planning a bug in the mobile Lucchese headquarters was not going to be easy. The car was constantly garaged at Sal Avellino's home. When parked away from home, it was never left unattended. And when being driven, Avellino drove deliberately circuitous routes to throw off any would-be tails. Members of the task force waited for the right moment. Meanwhile, the team practiced the bugging procedure, working with an identical car and hoping for a break.
In under 15. Ready? Go!
That opportunity presented itself one rainy March night when Avellino drove to a catering hall in Long Island for a garbage industry function. Avellino turned the Jaguar over to 2 of his hoods, whose job it was to stand watch over the car while their boss was inside. Meanwhile, the team of bugging experts were watching from the far end of the parking lot. With rain pouring down on them, the 2 guards finally decided it was safe to leave the car briefly and ducked inside the hall. That's when the task force men made their move. They scaled the fence and dashed towards Avellino's car. In one motion, they opened the door and went to work on the dashboard, while one of the team kept watch with a walkie-talkie in back in case anyone approached the car. Within minutes, they had planted the bug. And just as quickly as they got in, the team exited the car and closed the doors, being careful not to leave any telltale drops of water inside. When Avellino left the catering hall later, his 2 bodyguards helped him into the car, none of them suspecting even remotely that the Jaguar had been tampered with. The bug immediately began yielding some of the most useful surveillance audio ever. Investigators knew that the majority of mob bosses did not pass on the business to their own sons, most preferring to keep their real family separate from their mafia family. They also knew the commission officially forbade heroin dealing. The bosses felt that stiff drug sentences would tempt those arrested to turn and testify against the mafia. Conversations recorded in the JAG confirmed those findings. Here, Tony, Dux, and Avellino can be heard discussing the merits of inducting their sons into the Mafia.
Andy Russo just made his other son, the eldest one. When? I guess on the last, recently, I don't know when, I mean, you know, in the last year. Yeah. He made his two sons. So you'll make him kid? No, not now. I mean, not my thinking right now is no. Might change 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but right now my thinking is no. You were talking about that the other day with Tom. Oh, I didn't know it was 3 o'clock. And their feeling is that if this life was good enough for them, why isn't it good enough for their son? Who said that? Well, they got to be feeling that way. They got to think that way. Who? Tom said that? No. Tom said he would never, if he had a son, he would never say, Tom feels like you feel. Tom says, no, I would never make my son. Right? As long as you live it. What happens if your kid knows all these types of people? This scum, and you get your kid like he's in a union and stuff, and he knows all these people, what would you do? Like, he gets involved here, he gets involved there. No, they're not crooked, you know? What happens when some of these fucking shit eaters think they got, that they figure they got something coming, or they're going to annoy him, or they you know, that's that type of people. You know? I'm just talking out loud.
And here, Corallo is blunt about what to do with Mafia members found selling heroin.
The original objective of the investigation was to capture evidence, collect as much evidence about the carting industry. Well, what do you know? They caught conversations of the boss of the Lucchese Crime Family speaking about a variety of crime family interests, including the concrete case. And those tapes were the foundation for what was later known as the Commission case.
This was the effort by the U.S. Attorney's Office to bring down the heads of all the New York crime families. Michael Chertoff was the lead prosecutor.
What the case did was we essentially proved the activities of the Commission over a 50-year period. We had evidence about the famous 1957 meeting of the bosses in Appalachia, New York. We had evidence of other Commission meetings, and we actually demonstrated members of the Commission engaged in dividing up the proceeds of extortion in the construction industry in the city of Manhattan. Bosses and their lieutenants sitting down and talking about how to cut up the money that they were receiving from concrete companies that were paying off on every contract that they engaged in Manhattan. Basically what the Commission did was divide up every contract involving the pouring of concrete that was over $2 million in value among the 4 families. The Bonanno family was cut out of that conspiracy. And every job would result in a payment of 2% of the contract price to the bosses, who we then divided them up among the various families as their share of this extortion operation. We also proved that the Commission had authorized the murder of Carmine Tramunti, who was the boss of the Bonanno family in 1979, and we did that in the old-fashioned way. We used fingerprint evidence, we used eyewitness evidence, and we used circumstantial evidence from videotapes and photographs. And with that evidence, the wiretaps, the physical evidence, the fingerprints,